Hello guys. Today I want to talk about simple things that we should take in account when we talk about classical history. For example, if we talk about Napoleon intrusion into Russia in 1812, we have to keep in mind that the only road, mostly only road that he used was like certain width, and there's no way so much troops, as what they say in official history, could pass through the only road for such distance and maintain the needed supply rate for all the horses, all the people, and so on. And the same thing with Mongol uh, capturing Russia and all this territory for 300 years. There's no simple explanation for how they actually intruded all that far from Mongolia, how much people they actually had in their army, and how much horses, and who was feeding all this, human resources during all this time, and so on. So many contradictions appear when you start calculating the actual rate of food and supplies that they should receive on that army, horse hordes of a bunch of people, like 300,000 and so on. I mean, this is ridiculous when you start doing this calculation. But anyways, let's do something more I would say questionable, like these both examples that I just mentioned are not so popular. But for example, the situation with Giza complex construction, those so-called pyramids of Giza, and how they were constructed, how many people were actually involved in the construction. As they say, around 100,000 people were doing it for 20 years, and they had certain shifts, like 4 times a year they were switching, so 3 months each shift. So let's say it was 25,000 people, and the rest 75,000 were just resting somewhere else, or they can say it was more people, but anyway, we just say like it's a minimum type of calculation in favor of official science, actually, because you can say it was 30,000, 40,000 people at the same time. Well, anyways, it's we'll just do 25,000, and they say around 4,000 were actually constructing, working with blocks and all this stuff. Around 1,500 people were actually pushing those blocks. I don't know, carrying those blocks. This constant maintenance of this supply, and around some sort of people were working at the ships. Some were working at the quarries and getting those blocks from the quarry, lifting them up, and so on. And so all these 25,000 people were related to one construction of this Giza complex at the same time. And of course they had to have some type of a village or a little town of those construction workers if they were nearby the pyramids, and they found this small area of a possible location of those construction workers. And let's say it's okay to place like 10 to 15,000 people at the same time, resting at that place. But they say these were not slaves, because as many alternative research missions were going to pyramid, and everybody was finding out that wasn't supposed to be slaves, because sometimes the work is so intense and qualified that there's no way those slaves could do that. So the officials right now, at least in Russia, the officials saying they were no slaves. They were hired. I would like officially hired people, and had some sort of relations as what we have right now. So they assumed they were specialists, 25,000 specialists that were hired, actually. And they say even families could be living in them. So it was a continuous shift to shift work, when people were receiving their payment, not beaten like slave workers would be beaten, and totally devastated, and skinny slaves couldn't be lifting all those big blocks. So they shift to mercenary or hired specialists, I would say. Well, anyways, um, let's be okay with this hired theory. It sounds a lot more plausible than the slave one. But anyway, how could you feed all these people at the same time? How many cooks you supposed to have? Let's say they were slave cooks or whatever, but those cooks supposed to be cooking and cooking and cooking and cooking to feed all these people 3 times a day, and give them at least, let's say, 300 grams of meat per day, because they say they were giving them chicken, they were giving them some, small animals like sheep, and maybe, I don't know, somebody was eating who was a high rank, they were eating cows, and somebody was eating pork and so on. So they saying like they were fed well, they were eating fish, they were eating vegetables. So all this supply chain supposed to be working for 20 years, a constant feeding of so much people. Just imagine how many food you're supposed to have in terms of feeding them well, because if they're a specialist, they can easily quit and leave your object without, certain job rate of a certain part of a job. So all this job would be halted. So you don't have to have those specialists leave. You're supposed to feed them well. They're supposed to be happy. And they say, yeah, they were eating good. They were eating good. But how much food you're supposed to give to those people if they were eating good? That's enormous amount of food for such large number of people. They're supposed to be eating at least 6,000 kilograms of meat per day, of different type of meat. I'm not saying it's only cows, but just imagine how much food production. They're supposed to be butchers there. They're supposed to be warehouses. Just imagine, this is hot Egypt. You just cannot leave those animals for an hour or 30 minutes to go wash your hands in the Nile. You're supposed to do something with those. You're supposed to skin them. You're supposed to keep them somewhere, because you can't just take all this meat and save it for a month or 3 months. There's no freezers. There's nothing there. Just imagine, official science is telling us that those people were fed well. So this doesn't work. How much water they're supposed to be getting each day? Like 2 liters per person, let's say, a day, without washing his hands, or without, just for drinking. Or let's say they were camels. They weren't drinking for months. But no, they're saying they were ordinary people who's supposed to be drinking. So let's say 3-4 liters per day for one person, including his family. So let's say 10 liters per one worker plus his family per day, just to wash his hands, and that's it. Not washing it all. But they say they were just hired personnel, so they're supposed to be washing somewhere. So at least some rate of that water should be counted too. So let's say it's 20 liters per day per family, for one worker. And let's say, even that's only 10,000 people at that camp near Giza Comes. 10,000 people with 20 liters per day. Just imagine how many water they're supposed to be storing each day. What is the supply chain of that water? If they were taking it from the Nile, they're supposed to be filtering it somewhere. I don't know, because drinkable water is not equals water from the Nile. I doubt that they were drinking that water. So they're supposed to be, I don't know, taking that water from somewhere, from some reservoirs. I don't know. So just imagine how much problems is to supply these human resources just with food and water. Okay, 25,000 people per shift supposed to be drinking at least 2 liters per day of pure water. Otherwise, there'll be epidemia there, cholera, I don't know. So, that is a hot hell of Egypt. Anyways, even if there were so many trees there back in the days and everything was green and they were just, having water everywhere, you dig a couple of shovels and water comes up with the fountain, that would be fine. But nobody's telling us this. They saying that was just like what we see right now, just a desert. They were keeping all these blocks from somewhere else, shifting them to the boats, and boats were downloading them somewhere near the Giza complex from the Nile, and you pulled all those blocks and constructed this huge pyramid blocks on the pyramid itself. And only 4,000 workers were doing that. But anyways, they had to cut those blocks somehow. They had supposed to have copper. They're supposed to have copper for cooking. They're supposed to have copper for maintenance. They're supposed to have copper for cutting stones. They're supposed to have copper as their main instrument metal, because that was the copper time. You just imagine how many copper they're supposed to have. And I think copper is easy to create than iron or something. No, copper is a lot more hard to create, to be something supposed to, they have copper production right now with the vacuum induction method, just because copper does oxidize very fast. So you have to do it. To do it the pure way, you're supposed to have to do it in vacuum. That's how they do it today. So I highly doubt that the quality of the copper that they produced without that vacuum method is very good. So just imagine how many fake instruments they were creating with those low quality production methods. So it was impossible to create all this production of blocks with those broken and partly departicles of copper, because copper oxidizes really fast if you don't use all these methods. And so I highly doubt that the copper was used, but they say it was copper. Let's believe them. How much copper they supposed to carry to that? They're supposed to have blacksmith. They're supposed to have this metallurgy stuff, all these stoves, and how much wood is supposed to be burning each day just to get all those instruments done, so they can have a continuous supply of those low quality instruments just to keep it going for 20 years, because everything was breaking down, breaking apart, because cutting those stones with those very soft material instruments is impossible. But anyways, they were doing that, is what they say. But so many copper supposed to be quarried somewhere, but they don't say where it was actually pulled from. You're supposed to have native copper to create such amounts, because how could you cut a quarry to get to that copper actually without no copper at all? So it's like, what was first, chicken or the egg, copper or the quarry, or instruments to get that copper from that quarry? And this is just enormous blah 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 demagogical question, rhetorical question. But they don't answer that question. They don't like these calculations. They don't like to talk about how much copper they're supposed to have and being used in those instruments and those. How could they actually do the blacksmith work without no iron? We don't have no base to do these blacksmith instrument creation actually with those hammers. You're supposed to hit on something. What was that something? If that wasn't something like a steel or metal, I don't know. It's supposed to be hotter than the copper itself. The hammer is supposed to be hotter properties than the copper itself. Otherwise, it will be melting along with the copper it was hidden, right? So I don't know. Simon Dan. I don't know. Who else? Wikipedia, guys, where are you at? Fact checkers, why don't you fact check all this stuff from the official science and put all these fact checking messages that this is partly false explanation of something like creation of the Giza complex, right? Just do it. That's my advice. I know sneaking around and somebody's posting fact checking those that posted written by 20 people. Just go to the million where million views are at. It's Wikipedia and everything can be fact checked there. Guys, do your job. See you later. Bye.